everyone. Welcome back to Tuesday Tea with me, Alicia Bakamudrak. Today we have Melissa back with us. I'm so excited to have her here again. For those of you who are not familiar with her, check out our last episode. It was about the joy reset, but I'll also let her just sort of briefly introduce herself again. She's been a dear friend for many, many years since my freshman year of college, so it was a while
Which was
ago
like
now.
5 years ago.
Exactly, just last month. Um, and we're gonna just like really wrap up this month. It's gonna be a shorter month as I'm taking a week off for vacay, but really just kind of bringing it home with this idea of leading lady energy. The world's a stage, it's waiting, how we just can show up for ourselves and show up in our best role and see what kind of just nuggets of wisdom come out today. So, welcome back, Melissa.
No, no pressure. I don't know about nuggets of wisdom, but I'll talk.
Everything we say is wisdom and nuggets. So, you know.
Thank you.
Um,
Nuggets for sure. I don't know about wisdom.
so remind people just a little bit about who you are, and then
Yeah,
we'll kind of dive into it.
yeah. As Alicia said, we've known each other since college. She was like my favorite freshman when I was a senior, and we've been friends ever since. I am in the education world. That's like my profession. Specifically, I work for a nonprofit that trains teachers to be effective urban educators, which, if you're familiar, is not the same as just being a teacher, right? So yeah, I think that's pretty much it that's relevant. I know I've already said it, so I'm like, I don't need to say a lot more, but is there anything else I should say
She
before
lives
we
in
start?
Chicago. That's where she's
I do live in
hailing
Chicago.
from.
I have they just turned 9, which is crazy because they were
Wow.
just born.
Yeah.
Yeah, my two little bull-headed Tauruses running around. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Perfect. I love it. So I guess just maybe a good entry point into this as we're thinking through, like what comes to mind just in general when you sort of hear the phrase leading lady energy, and like who is that lady or woman or
Yeah.
person in your mind?
Um, I think so many things come to mind. I think first and foremost, I think it's someone who's like very aware of and like super comfortable in who they are and is just sort of leaning into that, whatever that may be, right? Good, bad, ugly, and otherwise. Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is someone that we know self-awareness is very difficult for adults. So someone that is very aware of who they are, what they bring to the table, and who is leaning like unabashedly into that and into those things that make them who they are. I
Mm,
think that is what I think of when I hear
hmm
leading lady energy.
hmm and I think that kind of leads us into this idea of we've this month we've kind of had folks talk around overcoming this idea of imposter syndrome or like, do I belong? Am I allowed?
Yeah.
We've talked sort of about creating that space and that stage just to keep with the metaphor of how you're going to show up and
Yeah.
what that's going to look like. But I guess I'm curious about this idea of knowing when to be like front and center and sometimes
Mm,
when to pull back while still being the leading role, right? Like if we think of a
yeah.
play or a movie, I don't know, Titanic, like Kate Winslet is on the screen a lot, but there are definitely scenes in which she's not like the front,
Front
all
center.
Kate and then
Yeah.
everyone else, right? Like she sometimes is here, she sometimes is here, and then she's like got her big moments, right? Like,
Yeah.
Kate kissing at the front of the boat, jumping off the back of the boat, all the things.
Yeah.
So the door. So I guess like how would one identify that restraint can still be lead? You can still be a leader with restraint,
Yeah.
but then when to really like bust it open and like steal the show, so to speak. Because I just think we can't be always stealing it all the time.
Yeah. I
That'd be
think
exhausting and not productive.
totally. It's exhausting. And I think part of being a leader is like knowing when to pull back and when to like be in a supporting role because maybe that's what's best. And I think leaders sometimes lead from the back, not always the front.
Mm,
So I think the way I think of it is like the movie metaphor was really a good one. I think I'm thinking of it in terms of like just my job and my role. And there's sometimes where I've worked in schools where or even jobs when I worked at Starbucks for many years, right? Like my manager was very good at the business side of, and she was just such a mean person. Like she was not, she shouldn't have been at the front of house at all, which she knew that about herself. She was kind
Well,
of a
that's good.
jerk.
I
And so
guess.
she would hire like all of these people that were like me and like super bubbly and sunshiny. And
Yes.
she would, as much as possible, kind of hang back and
Not
just
be
like
in the front.
do the things because she
Hmm.
knew like she was kind of a dick. So, yeah. So I think that is one thing. Like knowing what you bring to the table is important. And this is where like the self-awareness comes in. Um, I am going to be able to sometimes recognize this is not my forte. This is not my area of expertise. And so in
Mm,
this instance, I can still be a leader by saying, hey, like you take this on because I know this is a strength of yours or a passion of yours or, something like that. So
mm,
that is to me like what that could mean of like you're still being a leader in that sense because you're letting someone else shine in that moment that you think they are best suited to. Or if I have a goal in mind and I know that this person has something that will help me reach that goal or help a team reach the goal, why
mm,
not let them step into that? Because sometimes it is best for you not to be front and center in that moment because maybe you are not best suited, or maybe you don't have the capacity, or maybe that's not your strength. And that I think that's okay. And that's, I think, why, like, at the end, the root of everything is just knowing who you are and knowing your strengths and growth areas. Not to say that you can't lead in an area where you also need to grow, right? Because part of that is pushing yourself.
of
But
course.
you have to be aware of, okay, maybe in this moment, someone else is better suited for this. So I'm going
Mm,
to cheer them on, or I'm going to support them, or whatever it may be. But I think that's also just part of like, even if you are strong at something, maybe you want to push someone else or give someone else that chance to shine, because
mm,
that's also part of leading lady energy. It's like
hmm.
lifting each other up and elevating other voices and other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love this idea. Like it keeps bringing to mind that idea of like, um, I don't know who invented this. It wasn't me, so I'm giving credit to whomever it is in the universe. But like the mountain, it's not just like a little peak where there's only like room for one.
Mhm.
It's like this idea of like there's lot everyone can kind of be at the top, and there's like
Yeah.
a way all of us can be having our voices and shining in our own ways and in different ways, right? Because everyone's a different kind of person, and it's not always like what a leading lady or looks like in one capacity doesn't mean it has to look like that in another, and it's all the
Totally.
same. So I love this idea of there is like enough for everyone and championing others. What is that like
Yeah.
saying? Like, a rising tide lifts all boats. Like,
Yes.
what is a wind, a feather in my cap's a feather in yours, as my
Yeah.
coaching mentor Liz would say. Like, it's like it all we've been taught, I think, as women, especially about this like scarcity mentality and this competition mentality and like don't trust and tear down. And
Yeah.
that actually is far more harmful because unless you're a one woman show, which is not the most common, like you need the cast, you need the other people
Yeah.
for your storyline to make sense, right? And for you to
Totally.
look good or be in front.
Yeah.
We need everybody, and same in their part needs us too. So I just think it's constantly coming back to this idea of, like you said, that self-awareness, but also how to how to really believe in our core that there is room for everyone
Yeah.
and there
For
isn't
sure.
just one, right? Like I have to be
Yeah.
that
It's not
person.
pie. If you get a
Mhm.
piece, it doesn't mean my piece is going to be smaller, right?
Right, right.
There's enough shine, there's enough spotlight, stage, as you keep mentioning, like for everybody. Um, but I think part of it is like we have been socialized as women. Part of like that's like the scary part of like the patriarchy. It's like it's not just men that are like trying to keep women in a certain role or certain thing, right? It's women,
A lot of women.
sometimes unintentionally, sometimes intentionally, upholding these ideals because we are playing right into them because we've been socialized that way, right? And that's like no shade on women. Like I find myself doing sometimes. The other day, someone said, mentioned that we have a potential donor coming to one of my schools to like maybe give my organization money. And, in the nonprofit world, like we
You're
need
like,
that to
yes.
sustain ourselves and survive. And I didn't even think that it was going to be a woman. Like I was like, oh, when is he coming? And I was like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
that's terrible. And I had to like stop myself and be like, wow, that's pretty gross that I just assumed that was a man. Um,
Mm,
and like giving myself grace because like that's probably pretty common. Like we've been socialized to believe that like people in power are men. And so yeah, just like it shows up like that in little ways. And I think it's totally understandable, but we do uphold those systems or those social structures sometimes unintentionally, just because that's how we've been taught and sort of pushed. And every message in our society is sort of upholding those. And so I think it's important that when we have those moments like I had where we're like challenging that mentality,
mhm,
very difficult though when it's been so ingrained
mhm.
sort of subconsciously, like we don't even realize that we're thinking or doing those things a lot, you know?
Right. And a lot of times, unfortunately, while the system is very broken and the elements are malicious on some level, I don't
Yeah.
think it generally doesn't always mean though that all the players in the system are malicious
No,
people,
not at all.
men, women, whomever, right? Like I think it is like you said, this like, but it comes back to this conversation of awareness and being curious about the why. And this is
Yeah.
something that came up in a few of the other episodes this month, but like why do we do those things? Like where
Hmm.
does that tradition or that like thing come from? Or
Yeah.
like why instead of being like upset with yourself for thinking, oh, is it a man? It's like, why was that my first thought? Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, because generally
Totally.
I see like, the big guy in the suit, like with the money from,
Yeah.
the children's shows we watched like on Disney Channel and whatever. And so it's like, okay, well, that's like, can I shift that thinking? So my
Yeah.
judgment is just like, what else? And I think I do it with like doctor. If someone says doctor and like okay, and there's so many women doctors now, and I know so many of them, but it's still so
Yeah.
just like automatic, like, oh, that
Yeah.
must be a man, like or whatever else. So
Totally.
I think it's so true, though. It's a lot of just curiosity, and it goes back to this idea of awareness of who we are, how we fit in the
Hmm.
system, what influences we have, who's like trying to write some of our script, our story, and then how we are going to still have to live within a world that has a lot of, and it's like human, we have to have judgments and structures to stay alive and stay safe. Like we make
Hmm.
judgments all the time just primitively to decide like is that safe, is it not safe, we want to stay
Yeah,
alive, our
sure.
bodies, right? But that
Hmm.
can become like our biggest downfall in these larger nuanced areas of things we've deemed unsafe or bad that like aren't, but
Yeah,
because of historical racism, sexism, etc., it's become like that primal trigger comes on even in scenarios that aren't
sure. That
actually
shouldn't
bad or
be.
threatening, like
Yeah.
the saber-tooth tiger that's attacking me is not the same as
Hmm.
XYZ,
Yeah, right.
so
Right. No, right. It's so true. Like biologically, we have some of those like sort of defense mechanisms built in, and they don't
Mhm.
always serve us in all situations,
Mhm.
for sure.
How do you think you would either personally or just like thinking about it, like how would you suggest folks increase some self-awareness
Mm.
or even stop to like hear that voice when we make those like assumptions or the things that we want
Yeah.
to break the cycle of?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think unfortunately, and fortunately, I think the short answer is like that's just going to take a lot of time and like work. It's not
Mhm.
something that's just going to come easily, especially when you're talking about sort of critically thinking and like challenging systems or thoughts that have like been ingrained in you from pretty young age, you know? So that it just takes time and work and practice, I think, more than anything. Because it's like the first couple of times you maybe think of those things, it's like, oh, and I don't know, you just have to almost train yourself and then practice. Like anything else, it's not going to just come naturally when it's something that's going against everything you've ever done, right? Like when you start a new workout class, it's going to feel really uncomfortable and really hard and challenging. And, um, but if you push through it, then you're able to see like real changes in your body. And I think that's the same thing as like
Yeah.
if we're thinking about our brain and our emotional well-being or thoughts as like a muscle, you have to like push and challenge and grow. And it doesn't always feel good initially. And so I think the pitfall of a lot of things, whether it's working out, eating healthy, becoming more aware, self-aware, emotionally resilient is like we stop before we get to the good stuff because it is very uncomfortable. And as you said, our brain is literally wired to protect ourselves from discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I mean, that's really hard because we're literally battling biology, and that is like
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
because it's like trying to protect us from any uncomfortable or upsetting, unsafe thing. But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times we have to, I mean, you have to push through that if you want to get to the other side where you are, not to say that you're completely emotionally well or healthy or perfect, but like you have to do those that you have to put in the work. I think
Yeah.
there's some like things that you can do to practice those things like mindfulness and there's some like resilience building activities that like I know of just because we take our residents through these when we do our training, just because this work, I think it's probably similar to, your work. And it's just like there requires a lot of self-awareness as an educator because we're bringing in so many biases and like so many preconceived notions and just
Yeah.
so many experiences that
Yeah.
affect our schema and the way we look at the world, which in turn then affects the way we would like maybe treat people or
Yep.
a lot of white educators that go into like black and brown schools, they need to like break down some of those things because they're not even aware of them.
Right.
And so it's just like it's starting to create awareness by doing, some more like EQ work, right? Like emotional intelligence and emotional quotient. It's like that is the work I think that has to be done before you can really do anything. But
Yeah.
um yeah, sorry. So that was a long way of saying
No.
like you just have to kind of put in the work, I think.
I agree. And I think it keeps going back to this idea of knowing your values, your goals,
Yeah.
your motivations, because the more clear we are on kind of like where we're headed, how we're showing up, what we're doing, the
Mhm.
more we can engage in that sort of critical work because we have something to measure it against, right? Like if I value myself as being kind or honest or
Mhm.
inclusive or I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever, then I have this barometer and I have actions or thoughts or things that I
Yeah.
can keep measuring it against to say like, ooh, does that feel like aligned with me and my character, or does that feel off base? And maybe I need an adjustment. Maybe like I'm up, maybe this is off, and or maybe it's
Yeah.
that. But I think if for sometimes we just show up, and again, this goes back, I think, to just especially females socialization, like the idea of even having a goal or being able to have your own vision is like not even on our radar sometimes. It's
Yeah.
like I'm allowed. And so people just kind of show up for better and for worse and live a life to be the best mom to their kids, to be the best partner to their whoever, to be the best employee. But that's like living everyone else's script, right? Like your kids still have a motivation for you that might conflict with some of your own
Yeah.
because they have their needs and it's their life. And I think it's reconciling how to be these things for people while also being ourselves. But if we're not so firm in like our character, who we are, how we're showing up, we can get really lost in everyone else's storylines or let other people start writing our story in a way that doesn't always have to be the worst case scenario, like abusive or harmful,
Yeah.
but just isn't right because it's not us making the
So
decisions
true.
for our life.
Yes, that's totally true. I love that you brought it back to values. I think like, you and I talked about that last time and it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's part of again like knowing who you are. Like how can you be a leading anything if you don't know who you are? Because
Right.
yeah, like you are gonna then like, be like Dory and just be like swept along with like the EAC, right? Because like you aren't aware of anything that's making like you can't protest against something or critically think about something if you haven't even decided who you are or what you stand for. So
Right.
I think that values work is huge because like you said, you have to have kind of something to measure your decisions or like things
Mm-hmm.
opportunities against like so and that could be another thing like what you were saying is when do you know when to step back and when to like lean
Mm-hmm.
forward or lean in it's like
Mm-hmm.
well if that doesn't align with my values then I don't have to take this one on and it's no
Right.
like it's no disrespect or like anything toward anyone that is going to take that on but if it doesn't feel good for me or it doesn't align with where I'm going or what I'm doing or what I'm about
Right.
then that's easy that's like it's so easy I don't even have to like
Right.
think about it because That's
Right.
not for me.
Exactly. And I think, again, the more clear we are, the easier these decisions can be made, the
Hmm.
less guilt or shame or anything we feel around
Yeah.
it because we're unapologetically just like catching our stride and doing what we need to
Yeah.
do. And we're also owning we are badass, but we're not superhuman. Like we have boundaries, we have limitations, we
Yeah.
have capacities. And
Sure.
I think it's like anything when you think of starting a business or doing anything, you don't want to offer 1,000 different products to 1,000 different customers, or you're never going to really go anywhere. You want to be
Yeah.
like the best, like, I don't know, remember the Snuggie? Like they were fucking really great at their job for a minute because they made one thing and it was a
Yeah.
very like comfortable blanket thing that you wore around and
Yeah.
was really
And
cool
they
for a hot
doubled down
second.
and that was what they did. Like
That
they
was
didn't
it,
do anything
right?
else. Yeah.
And they
Hmm.
hopefully invested well and like had their moment and are still doing well. But that wasn't like we sell a Snuggie and an espresso maker and a TV remote
Totally.
thing. Cause then I'd be like, what are you? I don't understand, right? It's like
Yeah.
I knew what I was showing up for. I knew that brand.
Hmm.
So I think in our own roles, it's the same idea. Like, what is my motivation?
Yeah.
Like, where am I headed? And not to belabor this whole point, but you think of actors, you think that they prepare, they dive deep. Like, I mean, to the point where sometimes it doesn't go so well, like Heath Ledger and
Yeah.
the Joker, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're like, but they are like in a character, they like know who they are, they understand their backstory, they know their
Yeah.
motivations. That is a believable role versus movies where you're like,
Yeah.
gonna translate. Like it's and like I think it's just it works for us because it is real life on some level, right? Like we
Yeah.
also need to really be believable to ourselves first, but then that will translate to others. And if we're not, it's all just kind of missing the
Yeah.
mark.
Totally. People can, I think like people can tell when you're being authentic, but like if you don't even know what you are, how are you being authentic to what, right? Like I think that's
Mhm.
it's like the first step. I also think it's helpful to surround yourself with people that also are like doing that similar work. You know, I think
Yeah,
it can be hard to
100%.
be out here on an island doing really hard work, like introspection and like challenging, your thinking that you've been sort of conditioned to think and breaking down some of those systems internally if you don't have anyone that's doing work alongside you. Now, it doesn't have to be the
Right.
exact same work, but like people that value that sort of work and that sort of um, lift that you're doing, I think that can be really helpful. It's just like nice to have like solidarity or someone that sort of gets it. Um, like I said, maybe not in the exact same way, but you're sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
in the same storm. You might be in a different boat, but like you're going through the
Yeah.
same sort of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that can be really helpful because it's nice to be able to have those kinds of conversations where you
Mm-hmm.
feel supported or heard or seen or like, oh, wow, like I didn't think about it that way. Wow, like it's nice to know I'm not the only one that's dealing with this same similar kind of situation. So I think, like anything that's helpful when you're doing something, it's nice to have someone with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Community, collaboration, and accountability
Yeah.
are so huge, right? I mean, even just thinking back to those um like the orphans and I think it was like the Russian orphanage study, like the babies that weren't touched. Like it was so like they had such a depletion of their how they grew physically, everything else versus babies that like got community
Yeah.
and touch and handling.
Yeah.
And that's like on such a basic level, but we need that.
Totally.
We are not meant
Hmm.
like humans are
No.
tribal. We are not meant to just like be on our own. And unfortunately, I think these days everything is so isolated. Like, while we think
Yeah.
we have a lot of connection, it's very false connection. And it goes
Totally.
back to like the babies could have been watched all day if the technology existed back then by someone on a camera, but that wasn't, they were still gonna have the same maladaptive outcomes because it wasn't about like someone being there across the screen. It was about like humans really handling and being with them, right?
Yeah.
And I think even though we're not little babies, we still need that as humans on some level.
Yeah.
And that community piece, like that tangible community, that physical community, along with the great tools we have like this to like also connect across the world, but
Yeah.
there's nothing replaces that piece. And again, it doesn't matter like where you are at on your journey or what your scripts could be different, but it's like we're in a room together doing stuff.
Yeah,
That's so important. And I do think it
for
gets missed a
sure.
lot.
Yeah. And just someone, even if they're maybe someone isn't going through any kind of work that you're going through, maybe they've done the work, maybe they're not
Mm-hmm.
interested. I don't know, but maybe they at least value or support that you're doing that work. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's key too. It's like there's some people that are like, oh, like emotional intelligence, blah, like hippy dippy, and you're like, actually, like
There's something to it, but
research,
okay.
like studies show that that's like actually people will hire based on emotional intelligence now more than they'll hire for like actual qualifications because like you can train anyone to do any kind of work
Yes,
theoretically. You can't
train
always
that part.
prepare like train people to like have be
Yep.
emotionally intelligent. And
Nope.
so yeah, I just think it's nice to have someone that appreciates that or values that or just like sees that that's some work that you're doing and like validates that that's like good for you. That's important, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, culture is so important.
Yeah,
So
I agree
even if
totally.
you're a business woman like me, I still like, I need to create a good culture for myself, right? Or who I collaborate with or how I do get my
Yeah,
community because
for sure.
it's everything. Like
Yeah.
it's your mindset, it's your energy, it's
Hmm.
your
I mean, for you, it's
hope.
like more important because you are like on your own, for lack of a better term, in your
Yeah.
business. So it's like you have to be super intentional, I would imagine, about creating those connections because otherwise they just won't happen. It's like when people work from
Right.
home, how are you intentionally creating a community or building a community that just can love you, support you, challenge you, whatever? Because yeah, like that's very real, especially at like post pandemic when people are like more like
So
working from
remote.
home or sort of more, siloed in whatever they're doing. Um, I think that was very evident after the pandemic that like, yeah, that's so important. And like we didn't necessarily have an answer to that after the pandemic for a while, because people were
Right.
like so isolated physically they had to be. Um,
Right.
and then yeah, it's just I think we're still seeing the effects of some of that like lack of community. I think it's getting better now, but I think for a while there it was a little
Yes.
rough.
Yes. It's it turned everything on its head, which sometimes
Yeah.
can be really helpful to like, let's just
Yeah,
blow it all up and see what happens. But
totally.
it's uncomfortable and growth
Yeah,
is uncomfortable, learning is uncomfortable.
for
But we're
sure.
doing it.
We are.
Well, what would you want to, any like final thoughts of like what you want to leave folks with or like a little concluding sentiment that you have?
Um, I think this like wasn't what I was gonna say, but from this conversation, as we've been talking, I just think that I want people to be empowered to like figure out who they are and what they really value, because I think that really drives so much of your
Mm-hmm.
life. And I think that can be sometimes the most difficult step. It's just we're busy, we got a lot going on. When are we really stopping to like have that time to ourselves to really reflect on who we are and like what is important? And that can sometimes be like all we need to like make those shifts or those directional changes that can really impact our lives super positively.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna send you a link to this like values quiz kind of thing. It's not really a quiz, but it's essentially like a list of values.
Okay.
And what people should do is like write down the 10 that resonate with them first, right? So write down 10 that you really feel strongly about. And then you narrow it down to five. And then you narrow it down to three. And like sometimes this is very hard for people because we're like, but
Yeah.
I have seven values. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we all have like we all have a lot of values, right? But there is something to be said about like drilling down to really those top three. If you
Yeah.
really can't pick three, like, you do you. But like if you can, it's helpful. Drill
Yeah.
down to what are those three big rocks that like really make you, really like feed your soul, set your life, like your
Mm.
soul on fire, and then move forward from there, right? And like, yes, they can change from time to time, but like
Mm-hmm.
usually your salt, like your once you really drill down to those three, you'll find that a lot of times, like those really are the three things. Like maybe there's other things that intertwine with
Like
those things,
peripheral.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. But like for me, my three are freedom, joy, and authenticity. And that's like, those are my three. And everything I do like filters down from those.
Mm.
And I find that like sometimes I'm like, oh, is that really it? And then everything I'm like, nope, that's it. Like I can't feel good
You'll
about
still come
something
back to
unless
this.
I have joy, unless I have some sort of freedom or choice there. So
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, I will send you the
Okay.
link so you can
Yeah.
post it maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
below or
Yeah.
whatever. But that I just think that's a really helpful, super practical, tangible. It's not in big theory land, which if you're just starting on your journey, that's too much and it's
Yeah.
okay. So let's just like nail down our values and then we can all go from there.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Okay.
I'll definitely have it here. It'll be in the newsletter as well under like maybe your challenge of the week. And I'm so excited to get into it. Thanks for today,
Yeah.
Melissa. We'll
Yeah,
definitely see you
thank you for
again
having me.
soon. I'll see you guys
Yep.
later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.